Sigmund Bloom, any experience with traffic violations from other continents, and then how to proceed?
Not other continents, although sometimes Ohio seems like another continent.
My story is getting a speeding ticket in North Carolina when I was in my early 20s and getting advice from friends, don't worry about it, it's a different state. And then eventually going to renew my license and being told it had been suspended for a long time. And I didn't even know it. That's what you get for not opening the mail, right? Sigmund Bloom would never be so casual. He is from footballguys.com and joins us now on the West Her hotline. I want to apologize for roping you in here, where you just sort of, politely reached out to me with a couple of Bills thoughts. And, of course, what do I have to do? I have to tie you up for 20 minutes.
Oh, I always look forward to this. I always look forward to spending time with my friends and spending time with the good people of Buffalo.
Good. Well, that's nice of you to say. Dalton Kincaid was one of your questions. What are the vibes? Is there a chance, especially maybe with Shakir out for a little bit, that Kincaid can pop? He gets hurt again today, Sigmund, after your question. I don't know how serious, but he stopped practicing after taking a hit. Is it fair to say it's becoming much of the story, at least with Kincaid? If it's not connected and it's not worth sort of making a big conclusion about. We're often, though, talking about his durability. The offseason came, and the Bills GM talked about strength being a priority for Kincaid in the offseason. I also don't know if what's happened here so far this summer is any sort of sign of concern on that front. So what are you doing?
Yeah, I think that the pattern is clear that we may never see. At least Kyle Pitts in his rookie year showed us something that maybe implied a bigger career was coming, but Dalton Kincaid really hasn't had even a signature moment yet. And it's not just staying healthy. I think it is when he has been healthy, or as healthy as he's been, he hasn't influenced the game the way a first rounder would. He's looking like roughly like a Hayden Hurst in terms of first round tight end impact. And he's going to go down for being the player that the Ravens took ahead of Lamar Jackson. And I think you're right with Khalil Shakir hurt that's the moment that Kincaid, I think, is supposed to show how wise the Bills were for taking him in the first round, really as a pure receiving tight end. And it just hasn't materialized. And the question I showed up to ask you about today, Mike, was, we're starting to feel a little pessimistic when we look at all the injuries piling up. And maybe a reversion to the Bills' passing game that can be kind of frustrating at times, at least to begin the season.
I'm not really there. I have a theory about this, that because teams are so careful with players, and this could include Kincaid, that they're sitting down for not very much. And I think the way, for one example, Sean McDermott has talked about Khalil Shakir and even Joe Brady doing so, sounds like they're not really worried about him. Max Harrison at corner, I think, is a different deal. But I think there might be – we've had so many examples, Sigmund, already this summer of guys, it's not just the cart that we all make fun of now, but just, something happens, they leave practice, and then teams are a little bit cautious, but they prove to be okay. So I don't know that the Bills have an epidemic here, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I do think, though, there is more fire than just smoke to the idea that they're looking at their receivers past the third or fourth receiver. And I know Joe Buscaglia just ran a piece saying, hey, Curtis Samuel's on the roster bubble, even though he's guaranteed almost $7 million. And it sounds like Elijah Moore can be a useful piece, but not necessarily an impact piece. And we know how much Josh Allen relies on Khalil Shakir. So I think it only potentially becomes a problem if Shakir aggravates that ankle injury when he gets back on the field, or we see that he's playing, but he's playing through it. And that might become a problem more on third downs. But then maybe we'll just get back to Josh Allen hero ball, which is at least entertaining.
Right. My read here, for what it's worth, I don't have to be correct about this, is similar to Mike. I think they're just being very careful with Shakir. At this point, Sigmund, it would stun me if we heard at some point over the next few weeks that he's in doubt at all for the opener. So I don't think there's anything to be worried about there. That's a guy that's a very known commodity. I don't think, anyone can use, of course, reps in practice and whatever, but they know who he is and what he is. His chemistry with Allen is undeniable. So it's not like that's a guy. He's in a very different boat than, say, a guy like Curtis Samuel, who has not had a lot of time in practice here in the summers anyway, the 2 years he's been here. And last year, an injury sort of, took him out of the front three-fourths of the season, basically. He was somewhat productive at the end. So, yeah, I hear the Vikings are looking to trade for a receiver or the Jets, and I just think, what do I have to give you in addition to Samuel to get you to take the contract? Because there's big savings there for the Bills if they could find a partner.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe the real headline here is just how important Shakir is and how they're putting him in bubble wrap, because as he's progressing as a player with that chemistry and that relationship, and there's some actionable fantasy football advice here that you buy the dip, and if he hadn't had that ankle injury, maybe we'd be buzzing about how he's going to take a step up to an Amon-Ra St. Brown kind of level this year.
Shakir on Underdog ADP is pick 83, so end of 7. Keon Coleman less than a round later at 91. Bulldog, for one, is in on Coleman, and the Kincaid bullish argument for Kincaid applies to Coleman almost identically. Yeah. Right? I mean, could you talk yourself into him?
Yeah, I think that was the plan, right? I mean, we've heard from multiple sources now that was the plan. That Keon Coleman could turn into a big slot and not just do damage as a contested catch guy or someone on the boundary, but do damage after the catch and really learn the big slot position, so that he then becomes the guy that if Shakir is eased in or Shakir has some sort of setback with his ankle, that he's in the crosshairs as a guy that the offense is really going to rely on, and he could show in year 2 that he's ready for that.
Yeah, a lot of the buzz around the team this summer, to my eyes and ears, has read like I don't want to say they're banking on Coleman, but that there's progress, right? That his route running has improved. The coordinator used the same phrasing that our Sal Capaccio, our beat guy, used, 3 weeks ago when I asked him, what looks different about Coleman year 1 to year 2? And Sal used the word intentional. Like he's working more on setting up what he's doing with his feet and his hands and that sort of stuff. And Joe Brady today used that same phrasing talking about Coleman. So, and furthermore, the quarterback this week, Josh Allen, talked about Coleman. And of course, he's raving about him, and everyone's raving about everyone on every team this time of the year. But within that, did say we're going to be asking him to work inside and outside, which they've also said about Shakir off of the year he had last year. And so if there's a little more interchangeability there, maybe that's something that can spring Coleman, provided they can trust, they're not wasting Shakir if he lines up outside.
And I think just real briefly, I think with Bobby Peters, there's a lot of really good football theoreticians and people that are really looking at the big picture. And, there's some talk that you're going to see more formations where receivers are spread out and not truly in a cluster. In a cluster, but not truly in a bunch formation. And then you won't really have to buy space for receivers, and everybody will have that kind of inside-outside versatility because defenses can't pattern match it for zone, and you can easily run rub routes for man coverage. So that kind of sounds like what the Bills have the personnel to pull off if they want to do it.
So a year ago, I probably would have said the same thing. Drafting Josh Allen in fantasy as like quarterback 1, which is where he ranks. All right, somebody has to go with him, especially if he's going to contend for an MVP award, which he'd done in previous years. What happens? He wins, but nobody really goes with him. It's James Cook, Sigmund, and his 18 total touchdowns in the regular season. Can you see anything close to that happening again? The question you asked on Cook, I think, is a common one, which is, does his new contract mean he'll be used more? You have a more central, important role, more than 47% of the snaps. I tend to think not, but I don't know.
I don't know if he'll be used more by design, but I do think that he's a signature core player in this offense. and he's a player that I could easily see Josh Allen relying on, and maybe part of the answer of if they don't, if you continue to have injury problems with Kincaid, if this offense lacks that dimension, the vertical dimension that they hope that Curtis Samuel might provide, that James Cook could just be one of those guys that keeps the chains moving and ends up being used more than they designed because he's just really good. I mean, it's what gave them the confidence to sign him to the extension in the first place.
With Sigmund Bloom here on the Wester Hotline, footballguys.com. You can watch Sigmund on various podcasts, including his very popular series On the Couch, which I've been honored to take part in once before. Mike Schopp and the Bulldog here. What in terms of Allen and fantasy drafts, round 3, Lamar Jackson's right there, Daniels Hurts to follow into round 4. Do you like drafting, say, more than the average amount of those guys and building teams around them, or would you rather wait?
I like Hurts this year. I think that one of the hacks in fantasy football this year, and you're seeing a little bit of it, Saquon Barkley was the clear number 1 running back, and Bijan Robinson's going ahead of him. I don't think the Eagles are going to have everything line up perfectly. The stat I keep coming back to, I think it was something like 53 pass attempts trailing in the second half. And I just think you're not going to see everything line up. You're going to see more passing volume. I think that Jalen Hurts also, there were times he was missing Devontae Smith. He was missing A.J. Brown, although watch A.J. Brown in this hamstring situation. But I think you're going to see a more balanced offense under Kevin Patullo, the new offensive coordinator with Kellen Moore down here. So I think if you're going to take a quarterback early, I like waiting on Jalen Hurts or just taking Lamar Jackson because of the Ravens line was young and really put together on the fly in camp last year how it was going to work out. Now they can gel. You add DeAndre Hopkins. Couldn't you see DeAndre Hopkins changing the outcome of a few games last year? Maybe a few games that Bills fans watched. I think this is a game, a situation where the Ravens offense could also take a step forward from an already high perch.
While we're on AFC contending teams, what are you inclined to do with the Chiefs this year? It's been talked about a lot and written about a lot that their offense has not been what it had been earlier in Mahomes' career. Part of me, the part of me that's winning right now, the argument I'm having about the Chiefs is that I sense like a 5,000-yard, 40-touchdown season incoming from Mahomes and Andy Reid. What do you think about the Chiefs?
The key player in this conversation, I think, is Josh Simmons, their first-round pick. And, he was – a lot of people thought this was a pretty good offensive tackle draft. But some thought that he was the best in the draft, but he had, I believe, a torn patellar tendon last year at Ohio State. Well, he shows up ready to play in training camp, and it sounds like he's on track to start week 1. And the last we saw the Chiefs, you really spectacularly imploding. It was because of the offensive line. So you add a left tackle who can stabilize this line right away. And I think Juwan Taylor, the right tackle, was playing through injuries. He has said a lot worse than they let on last year. So if that is firmed up, another thing that makes me excited about this offense is that Jalen Royals, their 4th-round pick, it sounds like could be the rare player that Andy Reid trusts as a rookie and gives them some redundancy, because that's the other thing we saw last year was the offensive wide receiver depth chart fell apart for them. Then they lost a lot of dimensions in that passing game. So I'm definitely open to that, and I think that this is an offense. On the other side of it, we've been expecting this for a while, and they don't necessarily need to win games 33-30 with the defense they have. So we might just have, Lucy pull the football away again.
It's possible that I'm not recalling this correctly, but it felt like around the draft, like the day after the first round, we're in here doing our show, and it felt like the Chiefs were playing the long game. Like that Simmons, it was not expected that he'd be ready for the start of camp even, and therefore the beginning of the season might be in doubt. Maybe he can help them by the bye or that kind of stuff. And right from the start, OTAs, like he's there and he's 100%, and that just has not changed. So I don't know if they knew something that the people talking about the draft when it was happening didn't know, or if they just got lucky. But either way, I think it's a huge development for them.
Yeah, We don't need the Chiefs getting lucky. We don't need that anymore.
No, that's never happened. Certainly has never happened. Sigmund, one of the more exciting, fun aspects of fantasy drafts as we get near the season is, of course, the rookies. And it was such a rich year for running backs. I'm seeing, they're getting enough hype or even making plays in terms of Travion Henderson. I'm thinking R.J. Harvey as well. Of course, Bill Krosky-Merritt in Washington. This is somewhat common, but maybe there's a little bit more of it than usual, where you're seeing the rookie hype. Famously, Bulldog on Monday night in the main event, a few friends and I took Henderson at 303. Many are still buzzing about that. How are you playing these rookies?
Yeah, I think you have to be in on at least a few. You might differ in which ones, but you had some really good intersections of talent and a situation, and some of these already look like they're bearing fruit. Krosky-Merritt, you mentioned, and Brian Robinson's almost certainly not going to be with Washington. I'll mention Kyle Monungai, who, from all outward indications, has passed Roschon Johnson, and we've already heard Ben Johnson say, we're going to be able to trust this guy this fall. That's big for a seventh-round rookie. We've already seen Rashard Smith. I think it's clear he's going to make the team. Sounds like Elijah Mitchell has not done enough to prove that he deserves a spot on the team. And then how quickly does Rashard Smith maybe move into that Jerick McKinnon role? He has a very similar skill set to McKinnon, and it maybe ends up being like McKinnon was, like more valuable than the early down running back in Isaiah Pacheco, if Isaiah Pacheco can stay healthy. So these seventh-round running backs are on the scene and ready to make an impact this year. We're going to watch Woody Marks in Houston. Maybe he's kind of the none of the above answer with the aging and disappointing running backs that they have. And then as the season goes on, I'm sure there are going to be more names. So that is absolutely something that should be part of your plan, at least one or two rookie running backs near the end of your draft.
And Football Guys is invaluable at sort of tracking all this on a day-to-day basis. One of the first things I remember learning from you is the concept of rational coaching. And Woody Marks with Houston, they drafted him and they even traded up. They traded a future pick to get him. So you're considering a few things here. You're considering what the team has at stake. And, a lot of analysts have their own player takes, like watching these guys in college and thinking, good or bad of them. But it's really more important what the team thinks. And here's a player that was not everybody's favorite prospect, Marks. He's got a fun story with going as Woody from Toy Story for Halloween 7 years in a row and adopting the name. But, whether you think a person thinks he's a good player or not can almost be secondary to what the team might be incentivized to do.
And what the fit is, too, because that's the thing about
a
player like Kyle Monungai is not an impressive player in terms of long speed or phone booth quicks, but like Jamal Williams, who Ben Johnson had success with in Detroit, and also they had him in for a visit this summer in Chicago. He's just assignment sound and hard-nosed and a no-nonsense runner. I think that you're going to see the Bears want to have a very diverse run game, and I think that he's going to be better than DeAndre Swift on zone runs. I think you're going to see him have a fit. So, where Monungai on a different team, maybe would be on the roster bubble, I think he has exactly what Ben Johnson likes. And I think there are other rookies. Jordan James is interesting with the broken finger. I know Isaac Guerendo's back in practice, but if Christian McCaffrey goes down, he's another one that's just super solid. And Kyle Shanahan loves running backs that understand how to run his system. I think Jordan James we might be hearing about during the season in San Francisco.
Like it. Broken finger, is it early in camp here, but maybe not out for too long. You have a favorite, before you go, Subin, quickly, you have a favorite first-round pick?
Oh, man. I'll tell you this. Christian McCaffrey, I want to talk myself out of taking him, and I'm finding myself feeling strangely serene about the summer that he's had and having trouble coming up with a reason that he won't be back to the player he was. He's actually looked like that player now in those training camp clips, and it's the kind of pick that I think that either he makes your season as the pick at 5 or 6 or 7, or you have a fun challenge and you rouse the troops and you say, we're going to overcome this if McCaffrey goes down again. And again, just remember the name Jordan James.
Thank you, Sigmund. Great to talk to you as always. Enjoy the season. I know you will.
Always look forward to it.